In the 1970s, it was very rare that a Japanese was not the favorite for a gold medal, but this was the case in the 70 kilograms division in Montreal. The top prospect there was Vladimir Nazarov of the Soviet Union, the reigning world champion from 1975. He was also the European champion that year. Nazarov was a unique Soviet judoka, for although he did have a sambo wrestling background, his judo style was somewhat classical, with ukimata and taiotoshi being his favorite techniques. Although he was widely admired for his technical wizardry, he was also an extremely hard worker. He was an inspiration for Alexander Yatskovich, a famous Soviet player whose name is synonymous with the rolling jujigatami that is very popular even to this day. I always remember seeing Nazarov in training camps, Yatskovich wrote in his book, Russian Judo. Not only was he particularly gifted, he also trained harder than anyone else. Yatskovich recalled seeing Nazarov always staying back in the dojo after the formal session was over to work on techniques or to do some conditioning training. The Japanese knew they had a tough fight ahead in the 70 kilograms division because Nazarov had beaten their player, Koji Kuramoto, in the 75 World Championships. There was no reason to suggest the outcome would be any different this time. As expected, Nazarov blitzed through the preliminary rounds, beating his opponents from Poland, Switzerland, and Australia by ippon. Even South Korea's representative, Lee Chang-sun, could not stop him and succumbed to the inevitable taiotoshi for ippon. Kuramoto had a harder time in the prelims, winning only one match by ippon, but he made his way to the final for a rematch with Nazarov. The outcome of that match was to be a formality, but it very nearly didn't go as planned. As expected, Nazarov dominated, throwing Kuramoto twice with his lightning-quick cross-grip taiotoshi. The first one scored Koka, but the second one could have easily been an ippon. Even the Japanese coach, Isao Kano, was reported to have said afterwards that the second taiotoshi was indeed worthy of an ippon. Nevertheless, only a wazari was given. Kuramoto had a second lease of life and he very nearly turned Nazarov into a hold down in the final seconds of the match. But Nazarov managed to stay largely on his belly until the timer rang, giving him the win. At the 72 Munich Olympics, the Japanese were not very successful, winning only 3 of the 6 gold medals. For any other country, winning 50% of the medals would have been a huge success, but not for the Japanese. The national team made up for lost time the following year at the 73 World Championships in Lausanne, where Japan won gold in all 6 categories. At the 75 World Championships in Vienna, Japan was not as successful, although 4 of the 6 gold medals were still a good result. There wasn't an expectation that Japan would win every weight class in Montreal, but there certainly was an expectation that they would improve upon their performance in Munich. Japan went to Montreal brimming with confidence. The absence of a seeding system back then meant who top players would face in the first round was based purely on the luck of the draw. Sometimes the top players would find themselves facing each other early on in the contest, and that's exactly what happened in the heavyweight division. At the 75 World Championships in Vienna, Sumio Endo of Japan and Sergey Novakov of the Soviet Union fought in the heavyweight final. The Japanese became the champion there and therefore went to the Olympics in Montreal as the favorite in the heavyweight division. Endo's main opposition in Montreal was bound to be Novakov. As it turned out, they did have a rematch, but as luck would have it, they were drawn together in the first round. What should have been an exciting match worthy of the final turned out to be a rather boring affair, as both players were wary of the other. In the end, Novakov got a decision win. Novakov must have been relieved that he got Endo out of the way so early on, but that didn't mean it was smooth sailing for him after that. His next opponent, Paek Jong-gil of North Korea, in particular, proved to be a difficult opponent to handle. Paek's over 2-meter frame made it hard for Novakov to throw him with his favorite osotogari. In the end, Novakov managed to scrape through with the smallest of scores, a koka for an urinage. After that, Novakov powered his way through to the final, defeating Radomir Kovacevic of Yugoslavia and Keith Remfry of Great Britain. His opponent in the final was the capable German player, Gunther Neureuther. If the spectators were disappointed with the lack of big throws from Novakov thus far, they would not be disappointed with the final. The match began with some power gripping by both players. Neureuther tried to get a high grip while Novakov preferred to go for a less traditional double lapel grip. with his right hand holding mid-lapel and his left hand around the armpit area. There was much heavy gripping going on, but not much by way of attacks. This prompted the referee to give each of them a penalty for passivity. Neureuther tried to make an underhook, but Novakov responded with a powerful Sotogari throw, which caused the German to roll over and fall on his back. Novakov immediately clutched him in case the Ippon was replaced by Wazari, but there was no chance of that. The throw was so strong that the stadium erupted in thunderous applause. Novakov had given the crowd the kind of Olympic final they wanted to see. In the lightest weight category at the 76 Olympics in Montreal, no one expected much from Cuban judoka Haor Rodriguez, bronze medalist at the 73 World Championships. Meanwhile, Rodriguez steadily worked his way to the final, often throwing his opponents with ukimata, a technique he picked up while training in North Korea. He saw a player there using that technique and vowed to master it himself. He worked hard on it, and in Montreal, it had become his tokuwaza. Rodriguez's opponent in the finals was South Korea's Chang Yoon-kyung, who specialized in Marotsuyoin-age. And indeed, it was with that technique that Chang opened up with at the start of the match. Almost as if he was expecting it, Rodriguez countered the Marotsuyoin-age with a perfectly timed Kasotogari for Koka. Moments later, Chang managed to slip underneath Rodriguez and roll him over with Marotsuyoin-age for Koka. A minute had not even passed into scores were already on the board. This was the kind of all-action judo final fans love. With the scores even, Rodriguez tried to get ahead with Uchigari. This time, it was Chang who was prepared for the attack and countered Rodriguez so effectively, he had the Cuban in the air. It was only Rodriguez's agility that allowed him to avoid conceding a score. Around the 7-minute mark, Rodriguez came in with his favorite technique, the ukimata, and launched Chang high into the air. Only Yuko was given, although it could have easily been a Wazari. Chang attacked relentlessly with Marotsuyoin-age, putting Rodriguez on the defensive. At one point, upon hitting the ground while evading yet another Marotsuyoin-age attempt, Rodriguez seemed to have injured himself. The medic ended up wrapping his torso with bandages and play was allowed to continue. It was only later that Rodriguez revealed he had gotten injured during training in the lead-up to the games. It was obvious that Rodriguez was badly hampered by his injury. Chang poured on the pressure, regularly attacking with Marotsuyoin-age. Although he could not score, he managed to get Rodriguez penalized to Kuev for passivity. That gave him a Yuko, so that meant he had a Yuko and a Koka on the board. Rodriguez, meanwhile, had thrown Chang for a Yuko and a Koka, but he had an additional Koka because Chang had also received a Shido. So, in the end, Rodriguez was ahead by the smallest of margins, a Koka. The referee, who seemed confused, initially gave the match to Chang, who raised his arms into the air to celebrate. He seemed to want to get off the mat as soon as possible, but the referee quickly corrected his mistake and awarded the victory to Rodriguez, who became Cuba's first ever Olympic judo gold medalist.